Right, let's start then. So thank you everyone for your time. So I think this session is really just on a readiness assessment, just to see how everyone's going and where we're up to on CITE settlement testing. So we're obviously starting that this time next week. So we thought it was a useful session to bring together where we've got to in terms of what we're looking to achieve in that session, refresh everyone's memory, go through the data conditions and make sure that everyone's prepped, and crucially time at the end for any questions that anyone has, just to make sure that we get a fast start from next Monday. So without further ado, let's start going through some of the slides. Just bear with me a sec. My laptop's not allowing me to progress. Just bear with me a sec. There you go. Perfect. So we thought we'd start with a timeline that everyone should be familiar with by now in terms of where we are. So obviously we're in the maintenance window at the moment, so 1 week to go on that, so start of May. When we come out of that, then we go straight into the CITE settlements timetable for 4 weeks. So the first week of that is really the setup phase, and we'll talk around that a bit more in terms of the migration, the stabilization period, and then the test execution. And then we run on into the remaining phase for regression. So we've got 2 parts to this session, I guess. The first is just to confirm the data setup and the maintenance window activities that John's going to talk us through. And then we'll go seamlessly on from that then into the activity that's required from next Monday onwards in terms of the test schedule, how we use that data and how we progress through all the way through to the exit criteria. So those are the 2 bits. So with that, if there are any questions, just raise your hand as we go through. We'll come to them. But as I say, we do have some time at the end to go through those as well. So I'll hand over to John and we'll walk through the maintenance window and the data prep conversations. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, so as Stuart says, if anybody's, the real aim of this session is to make sure everyone's, totally aligned on what needs doing over the next few days in terms of closing out the data loading, and then primarily what we're going to be attempting to do in the first week of testing next week. So if you do have any questions, please put your hand up and we can ask them as we go through. So in terms of the data load, and apologies if people have been to the various working groups and G Leagues and the other sessions, I am going to repeat that, but we may have a slightly different audience, so I'll just run through. I'll run through that quickly. So the data that we're providing around 1,800 MPANs per cohort, and that's to do 3 different things really. So one is to complete the settlement testing. So we've got the cost settlement tests that we need to close out, and we're also going to be doing the settling normally test case as part of regression. So out of the total number of MPANs, each cohort's been provided around 50 MPANs. Some cohorts may have 50, some slightly less than that. And they're MPANs that we set up specifically to do the settlement testing activities. And I'll come on how to identify those on the next couple of slides. And that then leaves a balance of around 1,700 to 1,800 MPANs that people can either use for regression. Now, obviously, there's not a huge number of regression tests, but equally, we provided those MPANs that once regression's done, that if people want to use CITE as more of a sandbox testing environment, it'll just mean that people have plenty of MPANs, and that there's no opportunity that people will run out of MPANs. So we have sort of over provisioned, but equally, there's enough MPANs to see everybody through to the end of the testing that they're going to be doing in CITE. So if we go on to the next slide, please, Stuart. Cool. So what we have done is, and I think there's another slide where we call out the exact place this is located, but of the 1,800 MPANs we've provided per cohort, as I said, 50 of those are going to be for settlement testing. And you can identify which MPANs are going to be used for settlement testing as they have an allocated test case within the CSV file that we've given you it will always start with an S and then an underscore. And I'll show you what they look like on some future slides. But effectively, they're the ones that we're going to be looking to migrate in the first week of testing next week. So the MPANs we've given you, they're all going to be set up in a legacy state, so pre-migrated state. Next week, we're going to be taking those 50 MPANs and we're going to be enacting the migration business process to move them into an MHHS state. And you can identify them because they all start with S when it comes to the allocated test case. We've then got the remainder of regression, and they're identifiable simply because the allocated test case doesn't begin with an underscore S. Now, what we've also done is we've also set up 2 trackers that are located in the normal place MPAN trackers. There's one MPAN tracker that's got every MPAN in, and then we've also provided a separate MPAN tracker that's just got the settlement MPANs in, and they're the ones that obviously we're going to be wanting for people to focus in on next week, because they're the ones that we need to start migrating from Monday onwards, and we'll come on to what we need to do to achieve that on later in this session. Has anybody got any questions so far around just talking around the sort of total MPANs we've created and why? No, cool. Okay, so if we can go through then, please, Stuart. So this sort of gives you a view of the types of MPANs that we created. So the people, and this is for settlements. So if you remember settling normally, and then the subsequent test cases, we provided a range of MPANs with different attributes. If you remember the allocated, these same types of MPANs that we created previously, we've used the same MPAN categories for the allocated test case that we've provided previously. The only difference here is, just so they're easily identifiable, we've put this S underscore, and that's assigned to each of the relevant MPANs that we'll be using for testing. But it just gives you a sort of an overview here of the different types of MPANs, and anyone who remembers doing settling normally will be sort of au fait with these different types of MPANs that we've created across the different market segments. So unless anybody's got any questions on this, I'll move on. It was really just for illustrative purposes. And then, as I said, we'd created the 2 MPAN trackers now. So if you log into Teams, go to the MPAN tracker location, you'll see that we've now got these 2 new trackers in place. And as I said, regression MPAN tracker's got everything in. So it's got all of the MPANs that you're going to be using for regression, any MPANs that you then may use for sandbox testing, and it's got the settlement MPANs in. And then we've created a separate sheet then that's just got the settlement MPANs in. And that's what we'll be directing people to use when we get to the first week of testing on next Monday. Cool. And then I'll quickly just give people an overview as well around who's loading data. Obviously, we've had confirmation now from people that they've either completed loading data or they've given us a date this week when they're going to have it completed. But suppliers, we've asked all suppliers to load the MPANs we've given in a legacy state. Metering services, data services, we're not asking to load any MPANs. They'll receive the data as part of the migration process next week. We have provided MTDs through for TRAD and advanced meters, and we'll be asking metering services to load those as part of the migration process. So load the MTDs as if they'd come from an outgoing MOP, and use the business process then as part of migration to send them out to the data services suppliers and LDSOs. Has anybody got any questions on this slide? I think everyone's, based on the comms we've been having sort of this week and today, it seems like everybody's pretty comfortable with where we are. Would just sort of one closing point on this is obviously we are asking data services to make sure they've deleted any old MPANs out of their city environments. That's just to make sure we don't start generating any data for MPANs that are no longer within scope of the testing we're doing. So, we have asked data services to make sure that they start off with a clean slate, if you like, and that they have no MPANs in their systems. And then once we get to next Monday, you'll start to get MPANs migrated to then undertake the settlement testing. So if you go on to we have gone on to the next slide. Sorry, Stuart. So in terms of UMSO's loading data, we've had confirmations that they'll have completed that by Wednesday of this week. And really what we're doing there is loading the MPANs into the UMSO system so they're in a legacy state, which means they're sort of primed and ready. So when suppliers initiate the migration for unmetered supplies next week, that will appoint the UMSO in a MHHS guise, and it will then allow the UMSO to generate the D0388 out to the unmetered data services, which is obviously a critical building block, if you like, in those data services then being able to start their settlement testing activity. So UMSOs are loading data. UMSDSs, we're not asking to load any data. They'll get all their data in as part of the being appointed as part of the migration process, and then LDSOs are currently loading data again so that they're ready for next week. Unless there's any questions, we can move on to the next slide. And I'll quickly go through EES. So EES, we're asking to load the MPANs in a pre-migrated legacy state. So that's what CNC are on with. Helix and DIP are effectively going to start off completely empty. So their systems will look like sort of day one at M10, if you like. So they'll be completely empty until we start migrating the first MPANs next week. And then MPRS and DCC, they've already completed their data load, and they've got all the MPANs into the right state in a legacy state, ready for suppliers to be able to initiate migration on Monday. So if you go on to the next slide. So I think what's the pertinent points of here? I think probably, as I've said, data services, we're asking you to remove all previous CITE MPANs, just so we don't generate any sort of spurious messages when we're undertaking the settlement testing. And then there probably isn't really anything else important to call out as part of this slide, other than just a reminder to data services to sort of start off with a totally clean system. Cool. And then unless there's any questions on data, I'll hand over to Stuart now. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks, John. So just putting back the PowerPoint page just to check where we're going to move forward from. So same slide we've seen before. I think what's probably more pertinent to get into is that sort of process. So when we come back, there are the 3 stages we need to go through to get ready for settlements testing. So the first one is we start off with no MPANs in the systems. So that's obviously what John's just gone through. Then we start the MPAN migration process. So effectively, we've got to migrate them all from the legacy world into the MHS world. That is just for the 400 MPANs, and I know we keep repeating it, but it is just for the 400 MPANs in total, 50 per cohort. If we go beyond that, then the Helix provided settlement accuracy reports won't run, and therefore that will give us a problem for settling normally. So it is very important we don't go above that number. All of the migration activity is provided on a forward migration next day migration process. So effectively, if we start on the 19th of May, which is the plan, we're aiming to put a effective date of the 20th of May to move us forward. More details on that coming up in a minute. We've got all the details going through, and we've got a choreography that we'll come on to in terms of how we run that through. It is important we try and get all that through as quickly as possible so that we can then get into the next activity. If we are delayed on that, it will cause issues, and therefore that's why we're sort of giving everyone the early heads up to be ready for this. In reality, we've got the Monday and the Tuesday allocated for the MPAN migration process to get everything up and running. So it's important we get to the gate closure on the Monday. If we don't, we're sort of losing a day. And then we've got a 3-day stabilization period. There is a bit of flex in that if we are a bit behind, but not much, only by a day or so, just to give an idea. Once we've got the stabilization period, which is effectively then once appointed, all the data services send in their daily If21s. So obviously if everything goes to plan, then the Wednesday will be the first day that we'll start doing that for the appointments on the Tuesday. A day or so to get that up to speed, because in the past we have seen that it could be problematic. So we've allocated a few days for that. Then we've got our first check control point to make sure that everything's running okay. We've been through the migration stabilizations okay. And then we can actually start on the test execution phase and actually making sure. If we don't get the MPAN migration and stabilization up and running for each cohort, we won't be able to start the test case execution, and then we'll be a bit behind. So that's something in the first week we're going to be monitoring quite closely. One of the things we'll start doing in the next day or so is putting in probably the daily stand-ups that we had previously before. I think they're a useful checkpoint guide of where we're up to. So I'll make sure they're in the diary with the usual attendees. If you haven't received anything, get in touch with me and we'll make sure you've got those in the diary as well. If we move on to that choreography, we've put together a sort of what we would expect to happen on a happy path scenario. We'll obviously work this day by day as it comes around. But I think what's crucial is that week 1 in that setup phase, and I'll come on to the week 2 in a minute. So on the Monday, which is going to be the start day for next Monday, the first thing we want to do is just make sure that we can get the environments working. So we'll do a usual smoke test of sending out the ISD. So we'll broadcast that out from Helix Systems across the DIP down to everyone. We'll confirm everyone's got that and send that out. Everyone can then load the ISD, make sure that connectivity is all sorted, and hopefully we should be doing that sort of just before lunchtime. Then we want to get cracking once we've got that on the forward migration process. So that's for the suppliers to send out the 31s, and then for registration system to respond to those with the 32s, 33s. Then the agents for the MS and DS to send out the 34s, and then registrations to finish that off. We've put indicative times in here. They're not exact, but they're sort of just giving an idea of the flow on the day. But again, the crucial thing is that by the end of Monday and that gate closure event, we can get as many of those 50 per cohort in as possible to make sure they go through gate closure. And then we get the 36s out after gate closure. And then the 388s that we mentioned for the UMZOs to get those inventories across. If we can get to there, which we believe is possible to do, then effectively we end up with then on the Tuesday when we roll over, the agent appointment dates will become effective at midnight. And then the metering services can load in all the MTD data to supplement that migration process and get moving on that. Once that's then happened, then on the Wednesday, the data service can start sending the consumption data in for the If21s. So on Wednesday morning can send the consumption data for the Tuesday, which will be the first appointment day. And then we should be then into the regular cycle of that stabilization for the Thursday and the Friday of that sending in data services, the 21s every day for the consumption data. And just to note, that's obviously expected all the way through the 4 weeks then of A settlement testing to make sure that for each of the MPANs migrated, all of those daily If21s are coming in to seed the settlement runs. So that's important. What we've also called out is, depending on how well that stabilization period goes, the Thursday or the Friday, we'll take a call on initiating the first bit of that test case. So one of the key test case in this period run alongside the settling normally is the change of supply events, so the ST40 and its TCO 1, 2, 3 and 4 variants. Because the first event on that is a future dated COS event, and we've got a 3-day lead time to invoke that, what we would like to do, if possible, is get that issued out ideally on either the Thursday or the Friday, depending on how stabilization's gone. Reality, it's probably going to be the Friday, but the Thursday, some cohorts, if they're advanced enough in the stabilization, could start that test to get the clock ticking on that test case, which will save us time later on. The reason why that's important is looking forward to week 2, the Monday's the bank holiday. Therefore, we won't have any testing on that day. So if we can get that COS event going on the calendar day basis, then we save ourselves time. If we miss it and do it on the Tuesday, we lose a few more days. So again, trying to get into the testing as quick as possible, that setup would be incredibly useful to get that done before the weekend. And then on Tuesday, we can then start with the regression settling anomaly tests and the other test events as well with a bit of a head start and then into the cycle. So we thought it was important just to sort of set the expectations on each party, building on the data conditions, and to sort of build that sort of what does week 1 look like and moving into week 2. We'll use the stand-ups all the way through that week to check on progress, and we'll take any corrective action as required, depending on where we get to. Any questions on that week 1 choreography? Kevin?
Monday looks a challenge.
So Monday it's a busy day. I won't deny it. I think that's why we've kept the Tuesday as contingency in that migration if we can't get through. So if we need to split the MPANs, we do as much as we can on the Monday. If there's any residual that carries over to Tuesday, we still have time on the Tuesday to do that, advance the day for the next day for those ones, and then carry on in the week.
Okay, but looking at your timelines, there's an hour and a half to send 50.
Yep. And
well, actually 100, because there's 2 as if 31s.
And that's why I think, and I know that, Kev, I think part of that is indicative timelines to get us to the gate closure event, because what we don't want, I guess, is if we've managed to do all the, say, the supplier activities have been delayed and the agents effectively don't get time to do their activities. So it's really trying to gauge that as best we can to move forward with pace, but recognizing it's not a one hit. If you don't make it by the end of the day, all is lost. We just have to roll over to the next day, repeat the same process again.
Okay, so the truth is you're expecting some to roll over.
In an ideal world, we'd do all of them, but in reality, if we got 20 done on the first day, for example, and the rest happen on the next day, at least we got 20 MPANs ready to go to start the testing.
My worry is you're asking us to... Sorry, John.
I was going to say, I think what we have done as well, obviously you guys have got the specific MPANs now as well. So I think, any prep that you can do to automate that would be helpful, because I think, obviously a lot of the metering data services will have automation in place. We've seen that in testing where, 33 comes in and a 34 goes out straight away. Obviously MPRS is geared up to do the same, where it'll very quickly send out 32s and 33s, so once it's validated to 31. So I think
they're not the ones that worry me. It's the actual 31, because
the initial setting.
It's generating that.
That's going to be you're talking about 100. That's the slog in an hour and a half.
Yeah, well,
I don't think that's likely.
Potentially not an hour and a half though, because I suppose if Helix will have sent out the IF47 by 9:30, and if you've automatically loaded the 47, I suppose in reality then you've got from 9:30 then until 15:30, which is gate closure, for all of those activities to have completed then. So it's actually quite a long time in reality. If you view it through that context, Kev.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. There's a lot of ifs, if you pardon the pun, in there. It's just that just doesn't feel like it's. I think what I'm saying is, I don't believe that everyone will get all 50 done in that one day, and I think you are acknowledging that as well.
I hear the risk, and I think that is definitely there. That's why we've got a couple of days for the migration process as per the plan above.
So it's not the end of the world if not all 50 are done on the Monday.
It's not the end of the world, and I guess to mitigate that point, and it's probably worth having the conversation within your cohorts about which ones to do, because obviously you've seen the plan going forward. For example, if you've got the MPANs migrated to support the ST40 test case, because that's the first one we want to start on, it would make sense to start with those if there is a risk of not being able to do all of them effectively, because then we're prioritizing which MPANs we're migrating ready to start the test cases on. So I'd encourage everyone across cohorts to make sure they're aligned which data sets we're using, and also, I guess, to make sure if, for example, Kev, it does take a bit longer on the supplier ones, just keep everyone else informed in the cohort to know you're a bit behind to try and catch up so that everyone's got a fair chance of meeting the gate closure for as many as possible on that day.
Okay, and let's assume then that we don't do it all on the Monday.
Yep.
When is the end of the world?
So effectively, we want to rinse and repeat for the next day, for the Tuesday. So just advance the date forward. If we don't do anything by the Tuesday, then as part of our monitoring activity, it starts raising the risks in terms of the numbers, and it will depend on how many we haven't migrated. Wednesday will then be used as a contingency to try and get any extra ones, and then we'll take a call at the end of that.
Okay,
Because
right.
if we don't get our migrations done, we can't do the stabilization, and if we don't have enough MPANs, we can't run the test cases.
Okay, so that's all kind of baked into your thinking. It's just not on this slide.
Correct.
Yeah,
because
okay,
ultimately
cool.
we're not going to use every one of the 50 test MPANs
No.
for all of the test cases we come to. We're probably going to use between 10 and 15, depending on how many, but we also need some for contingency just in case we do end up with data issues.
Yeah, okay, understood. Thank you.
That's a good question. Anna.
Yes, just to, so the, sorry, the supply start, sorry, the migration date, the date of service provider appointments will be the Tuesday. So the Monday's the,
yeah.
I just want to point.
So we want to have a proper gate closure on Monday. You see, Anna. Do you know how when we've been doing testing it, you know, otherwise you end up with like incomplete 36s or them going out at different times. We want to get everything squared off, and then we know that some fully formed 36s are going to go out at gate closure then on the Monday for an appointment starting on Tuesday.
But you have to be, everyone has to be aware that if any of their IF31s fail, and they'll only get a 32, so they need to check the 32s to make sure none have rejected, because if they then go down the IF31, 34 path just on MS or just on DS, the other one will have to be not migrated as such, but loaded as a CSP rather than an MCA. So they need to make sure the 31s all go through, because the minute they receive a 34, no, hang on, I think it might be all right because it's future.
Well, the same day. If it goes into the following day, then it'll be same day. So we'll issue some
if any of the, what I'm saying is, if any of the IF31s, if any of the IF31s fail, and the 34 comes in for the previous 30, the other 31, that will migrate. So then they can't do an IF31 on a migrated MPAN. So we just need to be careful to watch out for any failures.
And that's why it's important that we've got this migration phase with detailed activity across all the cohorts to manage it, to make sure that we get to the right place, much like it will be when we go live at M10 and 11.
Okay, thank you.
John.
So 2 questions from me. First one, do we know when the fix for 53995 has been put into SIT A? This is an error that we found in SIT B when we bulked files through the dip. I know the fix went into SIT B last week and is being under retest. I'm just making sure that you guys are aware and it's not going to hit us in SIT A, because that'll be annoying.
Let me check on that one. I'm sure it was deployed at the same time or is planned to, but I'll do that. So
okay, the note in Teams only says SIT B and UIT for the deployment for that. So I just wanted to make sure that's been clarified.
Good shout. I'll check on that one. Thanks.
And then the second one from me, I'm just asking internally, but has a risk been raised by the fact that participants have now got no data in SIT A? So if audits happen and those participants are missing evidence for any SIT A functional migration tests, they're not going to be there to fulfill the audits without doing additional work. I know it was raised by a colleague of mine for the supplier side, which is why we've left our data alone. But if your functional migration come back with an audit to say the data service is missing evidence, it's not there anymore in SIT A. Has the program considered that, and how is it supposed to be revived so they can plug that audit?
Yeah, we did pick this up, Sean, previously, and we said, well, it'd be up to participants to take their own backups and, make their own risk assessment, of how they would, mitigate any risks like that. So I think it's, that's very much on the, the individual participants. I'm not sure what people have done, whether they've taken backups before, they restored the systems with no data in. But I think really that would be, that would be up to each party how they've sort of managed that risk themselves.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, no more questions, so I'll move on. Good questions there. In terms of scope, and again, this is a slide that's been out there for a while, so really just sort of outlining what we're expecting to test in that period. So 3 sets of the tests that are out there. The first one is the key regression test, so that's a repeat of the settling normally test case that we've done previously. So that's for the smart, advanced and unmetered MPANs. So again, what I've tried to put on here is just an articulation of how many MPANs we're expecting to use in a perfect world. So that's between 4 and 6, depending on whether your cohort has the unmetered or not in it. The second set is the COS settlement test, so the ST40 ones that we talked around before. So again, trad, smart, advanced, unmetered variants. So again, 4 different MPANs across each of those on the happy path. And then we've got the additional test cases for cohort H only to complete the qualification ones. So again, a couple of test cases, so a couple of extra MPANs. So that very much plays into the conversation we just had about how many MPANs. So that's sort of almost the minimum number of MPANs you need to migrate. So not all the 50, but again, the other ones give us that extra flexibility for everything else. Worth also noting that one of the cohorts has wanted to run a supplementary test as well. So additional MPANs need to be migrated for those supplementary tests on there as well. I think the only other thing to draw out was the assumptions we made, which are looking at this call, we've got the right sort of people on there. So we assumed that it would be similar resources to the SIP-B settlement testing, which looking down the list we have. So that's great. And obviously the main thing is that we need to progress at pace through these as much as possible. I think we all know from previous ones, they are quite complicated tests, and therefore we just need to manage to keep on top of it daily. And that's why the daily stand-ups will help us on that progress as we go through as well. And obviously we're all here for support as we go through this process. If I move on to the next slide, just a couple of guidance points that's sort of worth articulating. So for the ST40, for that COS test, which we haven't run before, so that's the final one of the tests we need to do. We couldn't run it in SIP-B because we didn't have the CSS system to do the COS events. We have put together some additional guidance documents around the test case, and that's been shared with all cohorts in the Teams channels for, I think, the last 3 or 4 weeks. But again, just advertising it just in case anyone hasn't seen it. What we have put in there is an example choreography in terms of how the test runs. It is fairly long and complicated, and I think we found that in the SIP-B testing we've done before, if we articulated a common sense view of that, it sometimes helps. So on the one on the right, that gives a snapshot of what's in that document. It's worth having a look at that to help the planning as well. So again, we've sort of talked through it previously, and it's in every one of the cohorts team channels as per the top of that. But just to advertise, that will be useful, especially if we start drifting in terms of time. Then this just sets the expectation of how long it takes, so we can reshuffle that along the way. So hopefully you'll find that useful. The second one is just to note that when we're running through these tests, we will be running these in BST. So everyone does need to be aware of the additional requirements that has. There is a known difference, obviously, in the design between the supplier effective dates and the STS, and the STS and the MDR dates. Again, guidance has gone out on this in the past. We're not expecting anyone to have issues on it. I think we had one cohort which had a slight issue in NFT on this subject. And so that was the reason just for raising it, just to check that everyone's aware of where we are. Previous testing was obviously done not in BST, so we just don't want to get caught out on that through the initial migration process. So just be aware of it and just make sure everything's okay, as they should be. Not expecting any problems, but it's just in case to avoid that. The final slide, just before we come to the Q&A, is then just to reiterate the sort of exit criteria for this test stage. Just to run through, again, all of this has been through all the different governance groups. So for the set 1 test cases, everyone is running the settling normally test case. The minimum set that we need is 2 cohorts to pass. there is enough time for everyone to run through that and pass. But in the event that people end up with problems or don't quite manage it, we don't need all 8 cohorts. It is a regression test. We've run it successfully in Sit B previously. This is just the regression test to make sure nothing's changed since that original run. Same is true on the set 2 test cases for the COS settlement testing. So we've got these running as paired cohort tests. So everyone initiates one of these and transfers it across to their paired cohort. Because of that, we're effectively exercising it 8 times from different cohorts. So we only need 2 of them to be successful to give us that confidence. Very much akin to the set 2 test cases we did in the Sit B settlement testing. And the final one for the set 3 for the qualification, that is up to that cohort to pass those. If we don't manage to do it in the time allowed, then we'll have that conversation at the end, but that won't be part of the exit criteria. This is additional time. There are enough time to run through those tests, but again, it's just making sure that the time is tight, as we've called out previously. So we just need to make sure we get a fast start on this and sort of manage this closely, collectively on the way through as we go through. I think when I was talking on that slide, I saw a hand go up and then down again. So just checking, Anna.
Yes, it was me.
That's all right.
Right. Catherine Kraken has put in a comment on the chat about the gate closure. Now, on your first slide, you said gate closure was at 3:30. Currently, in the Sit A environment, it's at 4:30 GMT, which is actually 5:30 BST. So we're running it at 5:30 at the moment. We're happy to change it, whatever, but it just needs. We just need to know.
I thought, well, that's strange, Anna, because I thought it had always been 3:30 in Sit A. Was that so? It was so it all happened within the within the testing working day.
I think at one point it was at the beginning, and then I think we discussed changing it because we went to GM. I think we did the clock change, but I think at one point we talked about changing it. But anyway, it is perhaps we changed it by accident because of GMT.
Because that was me giving Stuart info then when that's at 3:30. But
so I guess the good news is everyone's got another couple of hours then to try and get through on each day. Looking on the positive thing. So Kev, you'll be happy with that, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's no excuses now, Kev. If you've got some.
I'll think of another one. Give me a minute.
I think I think we may have changed it to account for clock change, and I got myself confused and changed it the wrong way, possibly.
And are you all right? Are you all right? Just double checking that. Say that's definitely what it is now,
and then we can send out. Checked.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So we can amend our comms and we'll send this slide deck out. But so we're definitely sure it's half.
Do you want it running at 5:30? Do you want it running at 5? Which is set to 4:30 GMT, which is 5. It starts at 5:30, so you won't get your 30. Yeah. So it's between 5:30 and 6. And I can't remember if they come out at the end, so they might not come out till 6 o'clock.
Yeah,
but
I think
they have to be done by 5:30.
Yeah, like when we've triaged stuff in the past, they were always coming out basically, like a couple of seconds after 15:30.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that's the expectation here is that MPRS is probably going to send them out within seconds on the half hour. I suppose, Stuart, do we have any preference? Are we happy with 5:30? Moving forward, doing it at 5:30 now.
I think if that's
which
where
is obviously
it is,
after
to be honest,
it's obviously
fine.
After the testing day is finished. But I suppose as long as everybody else is comfortable with that on the call, I don't know if
I guess that's the key question. Does anyone have a problem with that, or is it going to cause issues in terms of choreography or add any extra risk? I can't see anything as long as everyone knows what the date and time is. It should be fine.
Yeah, because it was definitely 3:30 previously.
We did it so that we could have a chance to check all the evidence if there was any need at any point earlier on in the test phases.
Yeah.
I think that's why we set it so early at one point, but I think it's now. I think we may have changed it at some point because to give people more time. I think there was a conversation. I mean, a year has gone by. It's easy to forget what's happened.
If that's the time that it is in the system, then everyone's used to that in the environment anyway. So I suggest just leave it as it is at the moment.
I will confirm that just because I always BST GMT always gets confusing, doesn't it?
Always.
I will double check that and confirm.
Perfect. If you let us know, we'll update the slides to match it.
Okay, thank
Spring forward, leap back, as my granddad always used to say.
you. Yes, yes.
Super. Kerry.
Hello. I was wondering, are you going to send comms out about taking a backup of the test data just for anyone who couldn't make this meeting?
Sorry, I missed that then. Was that to me, Kerry?
Yes, it was, John. Just yes, we mentioned it about 10 minutes ago. The backups for the test data that may be needed for audits. I was just wondering, has that been rolled out to parties? Are they aware, or is comms going to be sent to them to tell them that's what they need to do?
Well, I don't think there's a requirement that we'd be auditing anyone as a program. I think Sean's point was more just about, you know, if you haven't actually collected all the evidence, or if you know, we're not auditing people's systems. I suppose it's if a code body or ourselves came and said, you know, you failed to capture evidence for this particular test, or you've assigned incorrect evidence. You know, so I think I suppose that's the risk, isn't it, that people are potentially mitigating. I suppose it's how confident are you in the evidence that you've collated.
Yeah, it's just for an awareness that they're aware that it's not going to be there anymore and they're going to have to take it. So that's fine.
Right.
Thanks.
But that would only be if you've removed data from your systems. You know, so the only party that we've asked to do that, other than it isn't essential services, but they've taken backups, is data services. You know, so it's only the data services that we've said, you know, you must remove data.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kerry. But yeah, sorry, Kerry. Who do you work from? Do you work for
ESG?
ESG. All right, okay, right.
Okay. Over to the floor in case anyone's got any other questions. Hopefully that sort of outlines expectations and puts us in a good position to have a fast start on Monday. I say, if any concerns, then let us know. Richard.
Hi, Stuart. Can I just double check on the previous slide? You had ST40 just being for unmetered, just being done by cohort A and J. Can I just confirm you don't want cohort G doing that?
No, so it's just for A and J at the moment because it's a sort of paired test. So it was just repeating between the two.
Fair enough. Just double checking. Thank you.
Perfect. Got that on that slide there. Yeah. Anna.
Just to confirm, is the ISD expected to have be updated at all?
So the ISD will be pretty much the same as the current version. The only significant difference in this one on Sit A will be the master settlement timetable, because we're running the reduced timetable rather than the full elongated normal timetable.
Right. Okay. We'll load it. And the other question is, as a central party as such, what are the evidence requirements? I believe there aren't any evidence requirements for MPRS.
I think on this one
SIP-B.
there isn't any. Yeah, so it's exactly the same as SIP-B in terms of the regression testing. So it's exactly the same as we did before.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you just go over, just for clarity, the identification of the MPANs, the 50 odd? And you said it's what, S underscore. So they are all ones that are in the, so they're mixed up with the regression at the minute. And you're talking about.
So what we've asked people to do is load all of the 1800 MPANs.
Yes.
We've given you in a legacy state.
Yeah.
Then if you go into the where the MPAN trackers are in Teams, there's a spreadsheet now which is the cost settlement MPAN tracker, and that'll just have the 50 or slightly less MPANs that have been assigned to each of the cohorts in there.
Okay.
So use that one if you want to, then filter by cohort E, and that'll just give you, I don't know, maybe like 40, 47, 48.
Yeah, I can see 48, I think.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking in the CSV files from the data load. in there. So same end result. So it's any test data allocated test case that starts S underscore is the settlement one.
Yeah, S underscore. Yeah.
Okay,
that's
cool.
wrong there. It's got a hyphen in, but it's S underscore.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Excellent. Any final questions? No. Okay. Well, that's been a really useful session. Hopefully, you've got value from that as well. What we'll do later on this week is we'll start opening up the comms channels on the Teams channels as well for the test cases, and we'll start having the conversations there through the execution as we have before as well. But if there is anything in the meantime before Monday, please let us know or reach out to us. If not, we'll get the check-in points sorted on Monday for the daily stand-ups and go from there. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Andy.
all.
Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.